What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Nolecast, and I wanted to do today a little review of the transfer class that Florida State is putting together so far on the defensive side of the ball. I kind of figured I could spend a little more time on this, and we'll follow up maybe with one on the offense, talking about different strategy. So let's go ahead and start here with defense. First, I want to give a shout out, of course, to our partners, the legendary team, 844-FSU Loan. 844-FSU Loan is the number to call. 600 Nolecast listeners have done just that to get their home loan. I've done it twice. It's an awesome experience, and I think Chad just absolutely crushes for us. So let's get into this. I kind of just have some general thoughts. I've had time now to watch the film on all these guys, looked at some of the stats bomb stuff, and I kind of like it, honestly, like relative to, let's say, the money you have to spend, which obviously FSU is still a pretty big spender in the space, relative to what you have to sell, which is some recent success over the last couple of years, but obviously the most recent year looked like an absolute disaster because it was. So that's a bit of an issue. I think you did a pretty good job here. Pretty good, I think, at least, overall on the defensive side. And I'll have some different thoughts there on the offense. I also think you have a decent blend of somewhat proven production, but also some potential upside hits. A couple guys who are potential multi-year guys, and a couple guys who are obviously not, and are probably going to be more of the immediate help. So let's start with the defensive line. To me, this is an area that you need a lot of help, and specifically you needed to add a lot of length. If you watch some of these guys play, watching what they've done at the college level, watching, just looking at some of their high school tape, looking at some of the photos that you can see these guys, they have added a whole lot of length. And I think that is important in Tony White's defensive scheme. He's going to want to play more of a three-down look at times. And honestly, like having people who can take and put their hands on you is going to be pretty important in this defensive scheme. Absorbing blocks, and that's not to say that it's all just going to be all two-gap. You're going to have guys who shoot gaps, obviously. But controlling the blockers in front of you, getting your hands on people, is going to be very important in what FSU wants to run. And so to me, like that's huge. Specifically here, if you take a look at this, I think the Williams kid from Nebraska is probably the highest upside guy, but also maybe the most proven of the guys you took. Like that to me is important in this scheme. Having a guy who has some real pass rush juice, because you did lose a guy like Patrick Payton. And you can say, hey, bud, like Patrick Payton sucked this last year. And he did. I mean, relative to what the expectations were, like Patrick Payton is still playing college ball and not going to the NFL because he tanked his draft stock with how he played this year. Now, maybe he will recover at the new school. I think it's very possible. I mean, clearly, like in the transfer portal, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And, FSU loved Patrick Payton for 2 years. And obviously they probably hated, what they got out of him in this past year. So obviously can't really like hate there, like another school taking him. But I think if you look at Williams, like that's a guy here for them. It's going to be really important to see like ultimately what they can do. And I'm excited to see like how's this going to play out. I think Williams, though, is a dude, high effort kid, 6'6", 250 listed, can rush with some speed, can rush with some power, understands how to play in this defensive scheme. I think he's a guy who they should expect an immediate impact. 24/7 Sports has him rated as the number 5 edge player in the portal, behind only Patrick Payton, Damon Wilson, Princely, who obviously went to Ole Miss. He played in Nebraska, but his brother, went from UF to Ole Miss this past year, and Williams Winery from Missouri, who was a former 5-star type kid like that. And Williams is rated above guys like Romello Height, who I thought had a decent year this year for Georgia Tech. Pretty nice game against Georgia, higher than like a Jalen Brown, who went to South Carolina. But I mean, man, we get down the list here, like it's not a great year for defensive line transfers out there, right? Especially not edge rushers. Marvin Jones is rated 12th in the portal. Marvin Jones didn't do a damn thing at FSU this year. And yet, where did he go? Like, it's not like he had to drop down to South Alabama. He went to Oklahoma. That's a damn good defense he's joined. Brent Venables is like, yeah, I see some of the skills there. It didn't translate, but it's certainly worth taking a shot on a player like that. I think for the Noles to get James Williams, to get him in, a guy who does have some proven production, he's actually shown it on the field in terms of like actually producing and playing well, but also in terms of that's a guy to me that has additional upside. Another guy here for the Noles who I think is a good get for them in the portal is the McCray kid they got out of West Kentucky. I watch a lot of Conference USA ball just for various reasons. Most of it, we talk about it on Cover 3. This is a guy who I think offers a lot of versatility for you. I think he could play multiple positions along the defensive line. Big kid, really good length. If you watch him, like it's a little more speed than I think you would expect, but like he does have a little pop to his game at times too. So I don't hate that take. Florida kid that I'm sure FSU would have been familiar with at least a little bit during his recruitment back there in 2022. So getting McCray into the fold, I think it's a pretty nice get for the Noles. Now, is he some amazing get? No, but I think given like the amount of money that teams had this year to retain their players, most teams did not lose a lot of really good players. There's a boatload of players in the portal this year, but I don't know that the overall talent level in the portal this year is what it was, maybe 2 or 3 years ago when you had a mass exodus of, let's say, teams like 30 to 70 in the sport when none of them had NIL money. You had some teams like Florida State, Ole Miss, Tennessee that were really taking advantage and pushing the envelope, Miami, NIL wise. Now everybody has money. Now, there are varying levels of it, certainly, but now a lot more teams can afford to keep their players. And so I think the overall talent level in the portal this year is down to me. Like I don't see a whole lot of special guys. And that means that you have to get guys who have a really good fit for what you want to do. And in this case, I do think that the Noles did a pretty good job of evaluating fit for the purpose needed on this defensive line. The Noles need more guys who can play that kind of 5 technique spot. I think McCray fits that pretty well, but he also does offer a little bit more position versatility when I watch him. Jason Jenkins is a dude who I think Tennessee wanted to keep, but certainly not at the price that he was asking for, I think. Did have some productive snaps for the Vols this year. 6'6", 281. Obviously, Tennessee's got a whole bunch of money. They just went to the playoffs. You kind of have to ask, like, why is this guy in the portal? Like he would have played more snaps for them this upcoming year, most likely. If you want to tell me, hey, bud, it's because you can't afford to keep everybody, I think that's the most likely explanation. Was he going to be a starter for Tennessee this upcoming year? 6'6", 280 something? Probably not. He did flash pretty well at times. I think that's something like obviously you got to watch for. I want to see like more consistent physicality from him. I want to see more pop from his game for a guy that size. And that's scary, right? Like that you haven't seen it enough, but you've seen it some. And you've also seen, some production from him. I know some of it's lower level games, but again, I don't hate the take here. You did take some guys in Williams and McCray who are more proven. Jenkins to me is a little bit less proven, but somebody who I think is worth taking the shot on for the upside. I'm sure if you talk to Tennessee fans, you're like, oh, overrated, not worth it. But everybody's going to say that about everybody, right? I'm sure Ole Miss is thrilled with who they got, but ultimately, like if you're a Florida State fan, what are you going to say? Or sorry, not Ole Miss, like LSU. Like LSU is probably thrilled to have Patrick Payton. If you talk to Florida State fans, they're like, good riddance. That guy sucked this year. So it's always in the portal going to be about, okay, can you get something more out of the player than the last school did? Like, do you know who just took Malik Benson, who was terrible at FSU and terrible at Alabama? Oregon. Some teams are always going to bet on traits and bet on their development, bet on their scheme. Hey, we can get something out of this guy because certain traits don't grow on trees. 6'6", 285 for Jenkins. That is a unique trait. That length and that size is something that is pretty special. And it makes sense to me that FSU wants to go out and get that. I think that they've spent some decent money here on the defensive side of the football, especially because offensively, like given what you're doing with Castellanos and them, like you're not going to have some good passing game. So you should have money to spend on the defensive side of the ball. I think they've done a pretty good job here. Diggs from Coastal, we'll see. Like, I don't think he's a starter, but could he be a rotational guy? I think that's very possible. Is he somebody who could be better than like a Grady Kelly was? I think that's entirely possible. So overall, I think what you have to like what Tony White has assembled on the defensive side of the football up front. All right, next I want to talk about some linebackers, but first I want to talk about congruity. And specifically, I want to talk about Creso Health, which is a new company that just signed up with congruity, and they are absolutely crushing. So shouts to Mike Bully, huge FSU fan. His company is Creso Health. They sell Medicare. They have like 350 employees. They have a nationwide program. You got to have 10 employees to be eligible for this if you want. They just put a company on that has 50 plus. I think they just put one on that has like 400 plus. And recently they saved another Nolecast company 40%, 65 employee company. May or may not be right for you, but obviously you want to hit up congruity. Link in the show notes. And I mean, look, Matt does an awesome job. Congruity HR is the best solution, in my opinion, for your business. Logistics, benefits, all your HR needs, payroll. Matt at congruityhr.com. That's who you want to hit up. But I talked to Matt today. He was super excited, and shouts to Bully, man. That's Bully. Okay, dad jokes, but all that aside. So, why is Caleb Herring available in the portal at linebacker? Have you guys watched this guy? Like, what? He was Tennessee's leading tackler like 2 years ago. Ends up going to Memphis. Has an okay year at Memphis. And now, or not, why did I say Caleb Herring? Good God. Elijah Herring. Excuse me, guys. Okay year at Memphis. Like, obviously, I think it made sense that, like, when Tennessee fans told us, we talked about this on Cover 3, preseason, they're like, we're not going to miss Herring. He was our leading tackler, but he wasn't actually good. Like, tackles are a counting stat, blah, 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 blah. They weren't wrong about that necessarily, right? Like, he's not a guy who's a total freak. But he's not a bad player either. And given what FSU has at linebacker, given what they didn't have this year at linebacker, I don't think it's entirely crazy to be like, yeah, a guy who's played a lot of college football coming to this program makes a lot of sense. I think it potentially raises the floor and allows potentially some of these younger backers that you have in the program to be pushed. For instance, like you get some of these young guys you have, they're going to have to raise their level of play somewhat if they want to see the field as a starter. I don't think there's any problem with demanding that, right? Herring is a guy who can do that for you. Bigger dude, obviously, 6'2", 230, good thumper against the run, can take on some blockers, like not an elite, like chase player, but somebody who does have some real size and can thump for you. So I like that take. I also really like getting Stephan Thompson, who, again, has followed Tony White basically everywhere he's gone. To me, like, that's a player who may not have a super high upside, but it is a player, in my opinion, if you look at his numbers, you look at his production, you look at like how he knows how to play this Tony White defense, that's a dude who has a really high floor. If Thompson gets beat out, to me, that's a good sign, because there has to be a certain level of trust with Tony White and Thompson. If he gets beat out, that suggests to me that the player who beats him out also has acquired that level of trust from Tony White. And it's probably some combination of like better physical tools than what Thompson has, and also an acquired knowledge of the defense, which is why spring ball is going to be so important for this linebacker room, so we can see, kind of how this shakes out. But I like the Thompson get personally. I think that's a pretty solid one. Thompson's also a guy who FSU pursued previously, like including last year, and obviously he didn't come. But this is a guy they previously scouted. So if you want to put some stock into that, which maybe you shouldn't because their portal evaluations this prior year were hot garbage for the most part. But the 2 years prior to that, obviously they were like the dead nuts. So what's their true portal evaluation ability? I don't know. It's probably somewhere in the middle. Nobody runs that hot or runs that cold long term. I don't think. But Thompson to me is a guy who has a little more versatility than Herring does, a lot of experience. You're getting some like veteran bodies in this room. Is it going to be an amazing room? No, I don't think so. Have you brought in guys who should make the room at least competent? In my opinion, yes. And linebacker is not always a spot in the portal that is easy to go get. So to me, I like what they've done there at the linebacker position relative to, like, again, you just went 2-10. It's not a spot there where it's easy to find guys in the portal. I think you have to be pretty happy overall with the job that FSU has done here. If you're trying to get back to that 7 or 8 win range this upcoming season, if you're like, hey, are we going to take down Clemson? Are we going to make the college football playoff? Again, things change so fast in college football. It's not impossible, right? Is it likely? No. Probable. Possible, probable. Not the same thing, clearly. But we talked about like finding guys who also have that upside. And I think a key difference this year between last year is that, to me, FSU has not tried to thread the needle as much this year with bringing in high upside guys who they also need to be studs right away. One of the reasons why I had problems with the Malik Benson take, and I was certainly wrong on plenty of the guys they took this past year, but one of the reasons why I first guessed the Malik Benson take last year was that he sucked at Alabama. Like, his numbers were so bad and literally one of the worst in the SEC in terms of a yards per route run perspective. And there were reasons that people inside FSU's program were like, we can get more out of him. Like quarterback was an issue there at Alabama. Like, there are reasons, like, they would tell you, hey, it's a really good take. And I'm like, yeah, but he's so unproven. Like, you like him because of the upside, but like, you'd like to have somebody who's a little more proven here potentially. You also didn't know you were going to lose Destin Hill due to the injury last year. So that sucked too. But ultimately, I'm going to circle back to linebacker with this. I like that they're bringing in Caleb Valley because he does have that physical upside. He is not a proven player. He had a productive bowl game, but I don't give a shit about bowl games. I don't think you guys do either, or you shouldn't, in my opinion. That's not a guy they're relying on to be a stud this year. If he arrives a year early, great. That is fantastic. But I don't think he's a guy who they're like, yeah, he has to be a starter this year, in my opinion. So to me, that's awesome, because that's a guy who maybe you can allow to have a developmental year without having to throw him into the fire too early. Now, a couple things here. One, it's like, okay, are you relying on your high school evaluations again here? Because like, I didn't play much in North Carolina. He was a guy they loved out of high school for sure. Didn't get him. Last year, in my opinion, they got in trouble when they fell in love with their high school evaluations for these guys who couldn't get on the field at their prior school. Now, in fairness, Carolina has had some good backers. So it does make sense this guy was blocked there at UNC. And so I am willing to kind of say, okay, like I understand why he didn't get on the field a ton this year. But in fairness, like, over-reliance on your high school evaluations and trying to get those guys the second time around burned FSU pretty badly this past season. So to me, like, that's a bit of an issue. What else do we have here? Oh, so I think that's a pretty good example of a guy who does have like some explosiveness and some real pop to his game as well that could be used for the Noles, I think, to be a pretty productive guy. So, yeah, linebacker, relative to what's available in the portal, I don't hate that at all, man. I mean, like, think about this. Who are the best linebackers in the portal you could actually get? Like, Bama took Hill Green from Colorado. All right. UNC took House from Washington. That makes a lot of sense because the Belichick connection. Obviously, his son was the DC there. McCullough went from Oklahoma to Nebraska. We only have 3 players on 24/7 Sports who are rated 4 stars at the linebacker position. It's not a great crop, honestly. A lot of these guys who are in that like 20 to 30 range in the linebacker ratings, they weren't starters. if you had a good linebacker, for the most part, teams hold on to him. So, yeah, I mean, like that's a tough look. So I think relative to what was available, like Sean Murphy went to South Carolina. He's a 25th rated linebacker in the portal. FSU did not have good linebacker play this year. Sean Murphy showed no signs at Bama or at FSU that he could play. Like, that's how thin this linebacker crop is in the portal. I think that's got to be a little bit scary if you're out there watching that. Something that I think we have to give a bit of an incomplete grade on, and we may look back and be like, this was a bad move, or we may look back and say, you know what, smart to let all the guys you've invested in and you believe in potentially, develop, is the defensive back room. FSU didn't take any DBs. Now, will they take some in the spring? I think it's possible, but I think right now you want to have some healthy competition in spring ball and see what you have with some of these younger guys. So, yeah. Speaking of spring, weather's pretty nice, Tallahassee right now. A little chilly today, but overall, you definitely want to be hitting up Madso. You want to be hitting up Township. Matt Thompson's always supported our show. We want to give him much love. Guys, like, if you're in Tally, the restaurant scene is so much better than it was when I was in school there, and I'm getting old, so obviously that's not saying much for what we had back then. But like now, it's like legitimately good, and like the patio scene at Madso and Township, weather's great. Go get a burger, go get wings, go drink a couple beers up there. It's awesome, man. If you're a parent in town, great place to take your kid as well, and it's a good vibe. So. Be back soon with the offensive one. If you are any Dallas Noles or Fort Worth Noles, I am doing our Cover 3 live show on Thursday night from Fort Worth, from Tan Hills. So that'll be a good time. Come see us out there. We will have the Orange Bowl on that night, and it'll be warm because we're going to get 6 to 8 inches of snow there in Fort Worth. So this is an indoor venue. It will have heat, and we'll see you guys there if you want to go. And I think Graham will be back for the next episode or the one after that, which would be cool. And a couple more updates coming soon. Appreciate y'all. 5 stars on iTunes, and give us thumbs up here on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Take care.